Welcome to Movies, Music and More, a podcast that explores, breaks down and analyses the music of modern day media. I'm James.
I'm Andy.
And this is Leslie. Join us, your guides, as we dive into some of the greatest scores of the century and uncover the secrets and genius hidden within.
Hello and welcome to Movies, Music and More, and my comment on that new theme is I hope you're not going to get copyrighted for using something that sounds so much like the Pokemon, which is what we're doing today.
Yes, we're doing Pokemon today. I don't think we're at risk of copyright because that is our theme song, and I wrote that one for us. But you're right, even just as we'll talk about today, well, let's backtrack a little bit. To clarify, we are doing the music of Pokemon and specifically the first ever Pokemon games where it all started.
Red and Green.
Yeah,
the
Red and
originals.
Green. Yeah, or Red and Green in Japan where it was first released, and then also known as Red and Blue in the international release, which audience might be more used to hearing it that way.
I'm always hearing Red and Green.
Oh, really? Yeah, it sort of gets referenced. They are the first games where it all started. And yeah, obviously, they were, well, if you don't know, they were on the Game Boy, which uses this 8-bit music, that sort of style we just listened to in our theme song. So I thought it was pretty cool, our 8-bit version of the podcast theme.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I just hope it's not going to hurt anybody's ears.
It's certainly, as we discussed today, it's certainly a unique sound.
It is certainly a unique sound,
Yeah.
but fit for that 90s Game Boy era.
Exactly, yes. So yeah, Pokemon, which this is, and this is no exaggeration, this is fact, Pokemon is the largest media franchise of all time.
I'm not surprised.
Well, it's like, I'm not surprised either, but sometimes like, this clears Star Wars, this clears Marvel, this clears all those like absolute household staple like franchises that we all know and love, clears Harry Potter easily, like all those things. It's Pokemon. Pokemon is the number one media franchise of all time. And deservedly so. Like, it's huge.
It is huge.
Yeah.
And, like, it's got games, it's got trading cards, which is one of the big things.
Yeah.
It's got its own TV show that runs for over 1,300 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's really like, it's covered all its bases, which, it's interesting. I think that's part of its success, that like it did just start with these two games, which we're going to talk about today. But yeah, it's grown, like, trading cards and then the anime TV show and then
There's
everything else
movies,
under the
and
sun.
there's that live action Detective Pikachu, which it was all right.
Yeah. That's the thing. They've got like a lot of hit and misses, I reckon. But they're also like, Pokemon as a franchise doesn't seem afraid to experiment, and that's been in their favor. Like, even I'm thinking of Pokemon Go, like the app game they came out with, what must have been 10 years ago now or something.
Yeah, a decade ago.
Yeah, but that was huge, and that was like a bit of a risk sort of thing. Like, this was a whole new thing for them, making an app that was meant to be more, everyone involved in on it. Yeah, they've had their popularity, like, yes, that they began in the 90s and those 90s craze around Pokemon, but it's really maintained its popularity. Like, it's still absolutely flourishing, which is crazy. It's like 25 years of Pokemon. In another 25 years, are we still going to be talking about Pokemon? I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, who knows? But it's also like Pokemon is very dear to our hearts and our family's hearts, to be honest.
Well, not really mum and dad's.
No, I think our parents would happily have not seen Pokemon exist because we were obsessed. And that's not just you and me, that's also my older sister and all the siblings in our family, like, obsessed with Pokemon. Which, over the years it has grown and grown, but if you go back to kind of the first couple of, they call it generations of Pokemon, like, I knew like everything about them. Like, I knew what level they evolved, what level they learned each move, where you could find them in each game. Like, we were high level obsessed, not just sort of casual Pokemon observers. We were invested in Pokemon.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I can tell we have stonks and stonks of Pokemon cards
Stonks and stonks of them.
hidden away in the closet.
Yeah.
And we have no idea what to do with
Yeah,
them.
we have so much Pokemon stuff and still love it to this day. So that's why I'm like so keen to get to today's episode. And I've been literally since we started the podcast, it's been in the back of my mind that I've been so keen to do Pokemon.
Well, you are now free to talk about your desires.
Yes, let's do it. And what's also good about this is that this covers another area of our movies, music, and more. We're covering a video game
Yay.
for the first time.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. Because we've covered certainly a number of movies at this point. We covered The Mandalorian, which is a TV show, which I'm certain we will cover some more TV shows as well.
Yes.
And certain we'll cover more video games, but we finally got there, which is great.
Yes, if you guys have watched the Little Tease trailer, we do have one TV show incoming.
Yes. So, Andy, why don't you kick us off? Again, Pokemon is so well known, I doubt many people will not have heard of it, but why don't you just give a brief recap? What is Pokemon? What is involved in a typical Pokemon game as well?
So, Pokemon started off as a Japanese video game, which we've already covered, and so it was made by this guy called Satoshi Tajiri, and also Game Freak as well, who's been the running lead with all of the Pokemon games.
Yeah, so
Pokemon
I think
games.
Game Freak is the sort of company that Satoshi Tajiri set up along with some others who are big names in the Pokemon franchise. That's where they began. And I think it began as a video game magazine.
It did. Posted by the man himself, Satoshi Tajiri. So he did he did most of like the early like the first couple of issues of Game Freak. So he did
Which just
all
it
of
had
that.
like tips and tricks to video games. It was like a video game review.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess guidebook sort of magazine.
Yeah, it was sort of something like that. Yeah, and like it was like a big success, and he went on to making it into an actual like company, which then they posted the idea of Pokemon to Nintendo. They rejected it at first.
Yeah, they didn't want it.
No, they
Imagine
didn't.
that if they had just said no, and that was it.
That was it. No Pokemon.
No Pokemon in the world.
I cannot
Not a
imagine
world I want
such
to
a
live
world.
in.
I cannot imagine such a world.
Yeah, but then thankfully,
They accepted it.
it took a bit of reviewing and things, and it involved Shigeru Miyamoto, who's like famous for creating Mario and all those other Nintendo sort of franchises like Zelda and such. Was only meant to take a year for them to develop this game.
Yeah.
How long do you think it actually took them?
5 years.
Yeah, 5, 6, around that sort of mark. 6 years. And apparently it was just fraught. Like they didn't have enough money. Staff were leaving all the time. They were doing ridiculous hours. But they had to work on other games in the meantime to fund things. But in the end, we did get these games.
In the end.
So because these games really set the precedent of like what's involved in a Pokemon game. Could you outline that, Andy?
There is 3 main things. There's collecting badges from gym leaders, battling Pokemon, and completing the awfully hard to complete Pokédex.
Yeah, gotta catch them all.
The
That's
weeks
saying.
I have spent on Scarlet and Violet just trying to complete the Pokédex.
Yeah, it's a good balance. Like it's story led, but you're also collecting, doing lots of battling your Pokemon, lots of trainers, collecting these gym badges. But then there's this larger target of collecting all the Pokemon, which can take forever, especially nowadays because there's like over 1,000 Pokemon.
Yeah.
If you're starting from scratch, good luck.
Good luck. Very much good luck. God bless you.
And I think like this game set the precedent. And maybe circling back for a moment and just talking about the inspiration for Pokemon. Do you have any insight on how Satoshi actually came up with Pokemon?
Well, when he was a young kid, he was a bug collector. So he went around and he collected bugs. And interesting fact, there was an entire manga published about his life.
Oh, right. That's cool.
I only managed to find like 2 pages that was in English, but yeah, it was really cool. And so like he had also been like when he was young, he was studying the Game Boy, and he was like he was kind of thinking, I think bugs. He caught them. Had something where we catch little creatures, and and the idea Pokemon was born.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually called Pokemon then, though.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
What
was it called? Like Capumon or something? Or
Pocket Monsters.
Oh yeah, Pocket Monsters. But yeah, you can definitely see the parallel between that inspiration of collecting bugs to then collecting the Pokemon. And I think he got the idea of the Pokeball, the thing that kind of traps is not the right word, but catches the Pokemon, and then you can carry them on you from a famous series called Ultraman. Have you ever seen any Ultraman stuff, Andy?
I've heard Ultraman.
Yeah.
I haven't watched anything.
I haven't seen any of it, no. But if you see a photo, like I kind of recognized Ultraman. Apparently, he has these little capsules that keep his kaiju and big, what's called Godzilla type monsters in them, and that's kind of
Kaiju.
yeah. There's different inspirations, bug collecting, and there's little capsules created Pokemon as we know it.
Here's some more background on Satoshi Tajiri. So he was actually born with autism.
All right.
Another fact about his life, he actually skipped school
Naughty.
just to play video games
Yeah.
at the arcade.
Paid off in the end, didn't it?
Paid off in the end, yeah. And he actually created, so I think we all know, just going to another video game trope here, we all know Sonic the Hedgehog, right?
Sure.
The company Sega, who owned Sonic, this was before Sonic, they were hosting a video game competition. So this was before Sonic, and Satoshi entered and created his own video game.
Right. Okay.
And it was called the Midnight Crows, I think, where you had to shoot down the crows when you see their beady little red eyes.
Oh, that doesn't sound nearly as friendly as Pokemon. But yeah, ultimately we got these first Pokemon titles, these first games, Pokemon Red and Green, released in 1996. And they were not expected to do very well. Because especially by this point, Pokemon didn't exist, so it was a new thing. The Game Boy had already been out for 7 years at this point, which for a console is old.
Yeah, it is pretty old. But
Yeah.
then again, the Switch is probably about a decade.
Yeah, same thing. It's sort of, but
same thing.
yeah, it doesn't mean it's not going to do well, but it's not ideal. You kind of want to get your games out early, ideally. But it was an absolute hit.
It was an
Smash hit in
absolute
Japan, internationally released, and just led to this 90s craze of Pokemon that, as we said, hasn't really died down since.
No, it has not, with all of the Pokemon stuff that I have been getting on YouTube with all the ads.
Yeah, our algorithms. One thing I found interesting, we talked about, yes, there's games, there's trading cards, there's TV shows, there's movies, there's toys.
There's toys.
But Pokemon, it has permeated culture. It's been in Macy parades, it's been on waffles, it's been on Pop-Tarts, it's been on coins, it's been in Time magazine, it's been in presidential candidate speeches. There's a musical about it. All this stuff just started from these little games.
There's even a cafe.
Yeah, there's it's bonkers. So, having kind of set the scene for what Pokemon is, let's look at our composer, because obviously our focus is on the music today. So our composer is Junichi Masuda, who was hired by Game Freak to write video game music, which at the time I imagine would have been for
Very 8-bit.
yeah, but also specifically for Pokemon. But then his career pretty much has just been Pokemon since. Maybe unlike a lot of the other composers we talk about, who they get to start with one film and then go on to do tons of different films. He's really
Just for Pokemon.
yeah, but I mean, good on him. It's been
Good on
such a huge success. So
He's probably got his 4 mansions now because of how much Pokemon
yeah, I think
he's
he'd be
making.
fine. And I think what's interesting about him as well, right from the start, he was writing for the Game Boy, so a bit different to film scoring and things. He had to program the music in, so he was kind of doing programming for the game, and then has gone on not only to be a composer, but now he mostly directs games, the Pokemon games. He does write some music for them, but he kind
does.
of came on. He's really central to the Pokemon games, even beyond the music, because he actually directs a lot of the games and things like that. His influences, he's said in interviews before, it's actually kind of interestingly hard to find info about this, considering it's such a huge franchise, but his musical influences were classical musicians like Stravinsky and Shostakovich, but he particularly looked at Super Mario as an example of writing video game music.
Which was Nintendo's big break at the time.
Yeah, and it makes sense. He was looking at this as an example of great game music that works really well. Now, obviously, as I said, he's writing for a Game Boy, and writing for a video game. We should briefly chat about, most of the scores we've talked about, either TV and film, they're very linear. So obviously, if you're watching a TV show or a movie, the music is always going to do exactly the same thing because it's always the same thing. Whereas in a game, usually you can move around an area, you can it's interactive, you can control how long you spend in one spot, which makes for an interesting challenge for the composer, because you can't just write one, song, because if they spend longer than your 2-minute song in an area, then there's no music. So the very common method and what's used in the Pokemon game is to just have one sort of track that loops over and over. You write music so that it can repeat and repeat and repeat.
So the nature of loops is that so the nature of loops, so it's kind of like a circle, right? There's no end and there's no beginning. There's only that one
Just goes
line.
over and
it just
over
goes
and
over and over and over and over until you pretty much start screaming at the TV to stop playing that music, or just go into settings and turn the music off.
Yeah, and
I have done that before.
Yeah, because it can get almost annoying sometimes
It
just
can.
going over and over. But the potential for this music to then kind of be inserted into your psyche, like you really get to know this music really well compared to a movie. Like even if you watch a movie 100 times, you only hear each bit of music 100 times. Whereas play, a Pokemon game in one scene for 20 minutes and you've heard the music 100 times. So you end up hearing it so many times. It just gets ingrained into you, which I think is one of the reasons why these songs become really close to people. Like I've got a lot of nostalgia for these first songs, and I know a lot of other people do as well. It's sort of quite different to writing for film or TV or listening to film and TV. One other thing about composing for video games, which really is not much of an issue now for modern video games, is that back then, as we've talked about a bit, you were listening to this sort of 8-bit type sounds. You were really limited by the technology in terms of what music you could create. Like you might want to write music for a symphony, but you can't because the Game Boy, the hardware literally only allows for a couple of different sound channels. So each channel can only play one sound at a time. You have 2 what we call pulse wave channels. These are typically sort of a melody-like voice. Let's just have a listen to the sound of a pulse wave channel. So I'm using examples from our podcast team so you can hear that's the sound of a pulse wave. It's got that buzzy 8-bit sort of sound we really think of. So you've got 2 of those. They're your kind of melody voices mostly. And there's one more channel called a wave channel, which is more flexible. It can create different sorts of sounds. Often it's not too different though. So I've got a slightly deeper kind of bass sound here to have a listen to. This is maybe your wave channel. And that's it in terms of you've got 3 basically instruments or 3 voices. And each one of those, they can only play one note at a time. So really, you can only have 3 pitches at a time, which is pretty limited.
Yeah.
There's one more channel called the noise channel, which is literally like a white noise. Like you'd hear your TV like fritz out or something like that. So here's an example. What tends to happen is you can actually manipulate this to sound a little bit like a snare drum or like a cymbal. You can kind of hear it in this little track that I manipulated the noise channel. So this is the noise channel.
It does sound like snare drums, but it also sounds like firecrackers to me.
Yeah, it's sort of, you've probably heard that first moment, it just sounds like white noise, a shh, but then if it's really short and sharp, yeah, it almost sounds like hitting some sort of drum or, that sort of popping, crackly, percussive sort of sound. So that's it. That's all that Junichi Masuda had to work with. 3 melodic voices and 1 white noise percussion-y thing, which... It's crazy, really, to write so much music that people still love using that limited amount of stuff. It's pretty cool. So Masuda studied a lot of 3-voiced music, which we might talk about a bit later. All these limitations sometimes are a really good thing.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah, sometimes limitations are the key to creative solutions. So we're going to hear a little bit of that. Why don't we sort of break that down a bit listening to our first track from the game? Andy, why don't you introduce our first track from the game?
So our first track is the opening titles for Pokemon Red and Green, or Pokemon Red and Blue.
Yeah, and this is the first thing you ever hear in the Pokemon universe. This
Really?
sets the tone, which is pretty cool. You see it. What actually appears on screen when you first see it? It is the title screen, but there's a little intro beforehand. It's got
Nidoran, or like the evolution of Nidoran.
Nidorino, I think it is.
Nidorino and Gengar fighting.
Yeah, so you get this little image of like two Pokemon fighting with a little bit of music, and then you get the title Pokemon Red or Pokemon Green, whichever one you're playing. So let's have a listen to it. All right. So, first of all, obviously we've got all those 8-bit sounds working together.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I didn't ask you before, Andy, because I guess obviously listen to these tracks. It's all 8-bit sound. We will have a listen to some of these songs in later versions that they've remade it, whether it's for TV shows, for Pokemon, or later games,
or for the Let's Go remake.
Yeah. So that's one thing that we should have mentioned earlier. That even if you haven't played Pokemon Red and Green, if you've ever played Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green,
or Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, they're exactly the same, really.
yeah, the music is exactly the same, other than they've redone it with new instruments and things.
And new graphics and everything and all that.
Yeah, and a lot of these themes as well are used all throughout the Pokemon. Like the start of most Pokemon anime films starts with a theme that we'll listen to later. Like this music is used throughout. So hopefully, even if you haven't played those original games, you might be familiar with some of this music. But I'm curious to hear from you, Andy. Like for me, I grew up playing these Game Boy games, and the sound of the Game Boy music is really nostalgic, and I kind of like the sound of it. Do you like the sound of the 8-bit, sound chip, or not really?
I like some 8-bit. Like that one, I absolutely love. Some others, they hurt my ears.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, like, I certainly know, I was chatting about this with a few sort of older adults, more around 40 or 50, who never grew up with those sounds. And to them, as you said, it's just like, ugh, these sounds are, not very pleasant to listen to, which I sort of can see that perspective. So I'm wondering how much is just nostalgia versus there's actual real kind of musical quality to these sounds. But one thing I will mention is there's a whole genre of music called chiptune, which is like new music that people are writing that uses Game Boy sounds because they love the sound of, this 8-bit type music. So there's obviously an audience for it, but I don't know if it's just nostalgia versus like these, you could almost think of these as instruments. Anyway, we had our key melody there. So that would be one of the pulse channels. So keep in mind, Masuda only has 2 instruments left, basically, plus his percussion instrument. The obvious challenge here is normally underneath a melody like that, you'd then start putting some chords in. But you need usually at least 3 pitches to make a chord. So how does he work around this? He's only got 2 pitches left, but he needs harmony. Any ideas?
Nope.
Yeah, it's actually sort of challenging. And what he's done is a really good creative solution, which is to basically arpeggiate, or arpeggiate is the term. We've talked briefly about this in The Mandalorian, where you take a chord and you just play each note sort of one at a time, broken up. And And what you kind of get by doing that is you sort of get an idea of the harmony. It sort of implies the harmony, but then it's also providing a bit of rhythmic drive. So a lot of the time, he's just actually using a couple of notes, just going. But issue solved. He's now got harmony, even though it's sort of not how we would normally have it. It works. So it's really creative.
It is I agree, it is very creative.
Now, I mentioned earlier that Masuda studied a lot of 3-part music, knowing that he only had 3 voices to use on the Game Boy. And he actually looked at a very old, not technically a classical composer, like this is about as old school as you can get composer, Bach. Have you ever heard of Bach before, Andy?
No, but I certainly heard of the wood Bach.
Yeah, different kind of Bach. Oh, you're terrible. Bach was like I think it's late 1600s or maybe late 1700s, like very old in terms of Western history, about as old you can get before it's kind of non-written music. Composer that was very famous for writing this music called counterpoint music, which is basically like this 3 sort of lines or maybe 2 lines that were kind of overlapped with each other to make music. Let's just have a quick listen as an example of the sort of inspiration or things that Masuda studied. So it sounds very old and sort of Baroque and classical type music, but you can hear just all those overlapping lines. That's just 3 lines of music like we might have on the Game Boy. So you can kind of hear how Masuda might have taken inspiration there for crafting his themes.
Yeah.
You can particularly hear that sort of interweaving, interlocking, layered sound between the melody and the counter melody in this track. Have a quick listen.
This theme I reckon, is really part of Pokemon's makeup. Like its build, like its face, its features.
The face of Pokemon. I think it's like permeated throughout the Pokemon franchise.
And the good thing is, you hear this in like practically every main game. Like there are main games and there's like side games that don't really link up.
Yeah.
And you hear it in the anime, and it's really cool. Like it's just there. It's always gonna be there. It's just really cool.
Yeah, it's the original Pokemon theme.
It's the original theme. You just can't have the theme. You can't have the video game without the theme.
Yeah. Well, speaking of how it kind of permeates throughout Pokemon, let's have a quick listen now. Keeping in mind that Game Boy sound. Let's have a listen to this theme and how it's been remade across each new game. So we'll listen to the original one again, and then it will go into the remade theme, which is from Pokemon Fire Red. So it's Game Boy Advance. And you'll hear it has some slightly better sound.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, which is much newer. It's on Nintendo Switch, and you'll immediately hear it's like, oh, it almost sounds like real instruments.
Yeah.
And then from our most recent Pokemon game, Pokemon Scarlet, they recorded it with an actual wind symphony and have it play it right at the end of the game. So it's with real instruments. So have a quick listen to this progression. So you can really hear the progression of like technology in that. But I think what's also really cool to hear is that like the composition he wrote on 8-bit sounds awesome when you put it into actual instruments.
It does.
Yeah, like it really, that's a sign, I think, that it is a really great composition, even though it's for 8-bit sound chips that, yeah, with each generation you can hear it grow and evolve, and it still suits real instruments really well.
I noticed what you did there with the evolve.
Oh, yeah, true. Pun definitely intended there. Yeah, great. So that's our opening title, which we haven't broken down too much, but gives you an idea of that sort of 8-bit, the challenges of writing for Game Boy. This theme really falls into, you can kind of categorize a lot of this first Pokemon music into a few categories. One being journey music, which I think this falls into, like the sort of sound of adventure.
It does sound very much like an adventure and all that.
Yeah, going on your Pokemon journey.
Going on
which
a
is
Pokemon journey, yes.
talked about a lot in the games. We've just got a few other categories. We've got battle music, which we'll cover next episode. That's obviously a big part of Pokemon. Let's stick with journey music for a little bit, because there is a lot of it in this game.
There is a lot of it.
As it, like, journeying is really part of playing a Pokemon game, and it's got this great journey music. So let's have a listen to two more. A lot of the game you spend on routes, like it's called like Route 1 and Route 2, which is kind of like the
25 and
I think there's
130 something.
I think it's only 25 in this, but yeah, we must be up to like a very high number in some of the newer games. But yeah, these are basically the exploration of almost the wilderness, like the different areas you go into. And let's have a listen to just two of the different themes that come up along here, just a selection. And we'll pull apart a couple of common things in this Pokemon journey music. So here's the first one, which is played often throughout a lot of the earlier routes when you're early on your adventure. Next route theme, which is played in some of the later routes. So a couple of things that stand out from that kind of make up this Pokemon journey music. One thing is that snare sound we were talking about earlier, the snare drum. I don't know if you heard throughout both of those, it almost sounds like a military march. It's like...
It does sound like a military march.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense for an adventure type thing, like you're marching off on an adventure. I really tried to find if this was like an actual march snare pattern, because it sounds so much like it could be, but I couldn't find any evidence of that, which maybe audience listeners, if any of you know much about marching music, maybe you can find a sort of snare pattern that's, there's sort of 1 and a 3 and 1 and a 3 and, because it seems to do that a lot. But yeah, as far as I can tell, it's not necessarily a common pattern. So Masuda's used this, but it sounds so good. And it's used throughout all this journey music. Have a quick listen again, see if you can hear that kind of snare drum in the bottom. I'll just play one of them in the bottom of the theme. Could you hear it, Andy?
Yes, I could hear it.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. The only other thing that really stands out to me when you have a bit of a look at the harmony is it uses the same chords throughout all this journey music. So it always is in a major key, which we love. So starting on a major chord. And then it goes to an interesting chord, which is not in a major key at all. It is from the minor key. It is the flat 7 chord. This is a super common chord that you use to give a sound of adventure. So you're kind of mixing, we've talked about majors kind of light and heroic, minors kind of dark. We're mixing that up. But just kind of adventure. It's heroism, but it's also a bit of darkness and danger, that sort of thing. Lord of the Rings is another one.
I still haven't watched those.
Oh, terrible. So you won't get this bit. As someone who's never watched Lord of the Rings.
They're 3 hours long. I don't have enough time for that.
It's like the peak of cinema. Anyway, you can hear that's using really similar, starting on the major chord and then borrowing this other chord from the minor key, mixing up heroism and danger together to make adventure, which is pretty cool. Should also mention the music for the gyms is another sort of adventure type music that you hear throughout quite a lot, and actually is still in, like, that's been used a lot in every single game. You can still hear it in Scarlet and Violet, the latest Pokemon game. You walk into a gym and you get this gym theme, which uses most of the same things as the other adventure themes. It's got that same harmony, that sort of gives it that adventurous vibe. It falls into that same category.
Now, I think we should let the listeners know we did try to speedrun Let's Go Pikachu.
Yeah, yeah. In our normal preparation for the podcast, we'd usually watch the movie that we're breaking down the night before.
Something.
Yeah. So you don't have like 2 hours to watch the movie, and that's fine the night beforehand. We thought, well, we better try play the whole of a Pokemon game in 2 hours last night. I knew we wouldn't make it, but I thought we'd make it further than we did.
We got 2 gym badges.
Yeah, 2 of 8 gym badges. So
which is like 1 gym
we got
badge.
3. Last night we only got 2, and then we played it a little bit more this morning and got 3. So
we got 1 per hour.
Yeah, we got maybe a third through the game. Maybe.
Maybe.
Poor effort.
We did have to go through Mount Moon and
we went through all.
I think it was like Pokemon Scarlet. I think we would have gone a bit farther. It was just those bloody trainers that just kept on getting in the way.
It was kind of fun. I liked doing it. And we certainly got to hear a lot of the music, which was good.
And James had his boy.
Yeah. My boy, my Nidorino. Love him. And
I stopped your boy from evolving.
Yeah, that was so mean. I didn't like that at all. So that's our sort of journey music. We've just spent a bit of time talking about that, and it might not be the music that people first think of when they think of Pokemon. Like battling is probably the music, which we will definitely get to.
We will definitely get to.
It's awesome stuff. But I think it's a key part of the music to bring up because, as we said before, Pokemon is really about the Pokemon journey. I'm going to tie in a bit of a, I don't know what to call it, story theory here. Have you ever heard, Andy, of the theory of the monomyth or the hero's journey before?
No. I've heard of the hero's journey, but not the myth of it.
Yeah, it's this idea in, I guess, story writing or mythology, basically. Joseph Campbell kind of came up with this idea of the monomyth or the hero's journey, which is this really common pattern of story in lots of myths and common folk tales and things. And it's basically a story template of a hero who goes on a journey, faces challenges, is victorious, and returns home transformed. It is used in so many things, like Star Wars directly. George Lucas directly kind of referred to it to make his stories. Basically, any movie that features a hero, you can probably pin this.
Guess where this is going.
Yeah, you can kind of pin this to it. What I think is cool with Pokemon, because it's quite clear that Pokemon kind of matches it, and we'll check and kind of tick off the different elements and see. What I think is cool is that you can kind of hear that reflected in the music as well. So there's 17 stages to the hero's journey. We might just summarize them a bit. But let's have a check through, and I'll tell you what stage it is, and you tell me whether we've got that in Pokemon while we listen to the music and see if that kind of reflects that character. So first stage of the hero's journey is we have an ordinary hero in their ordinary world who is then given a call to adventure.
Yep.
Often by a mentor figure. Forgot that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Got all-
Professor Oak with you.
Exactly.
And your rival, who we called Bad Breath.
Yeah, we call our rival Bad Breath. You got to call your rival something mean. But Professor Oak kind of sets us off on our journey. So at that point, the hero then crosses the threshold, is what it's called. Basically sets out into the unknown and starts traversing the world. Do you have that in Pokemon?
Yep.
Yep. That's literally like the premise. You're going out and exploring areas.
Yep. Got our Pikachu. We got your boy. We got a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yep, on the journey. The hero then faces tasks and trials along the way. It's known as the Road of Trials. Do we have that in
Yep.
Pokemon?
We've got gym leaders. We've
Yep.
got some sort of evil team getting in your way.
I was going to say, yeah, it's kind of funny how you just happen to take down evil corporations along the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, gym leaders, battles, Snorlaxes that won't get out of the way.
Yeah.
Evil corporations.
The Elite Four.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, eventually, the next stage we reach the final ordeal, which I think in this case probably is facing the Elite Four.
And the the previous champion.
Yeah, and the champion. And then finally, when you get to that final ordeal, the hero, he overcomes that ordeal and then gains rewards and returns back to his ordinary world.
Yep. I wouldn't say you return back to your ordinary world, but you certainly do get rewards.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is actually when you beat the champion in the game, it sort of, it celebrates and everything, and then kind of blacks out for a moment and comes back, and you're back in your house at Pallet Town.
True.
Which, if you think about it, why would that happen? Like, if you're designing the game, why wouldn't you just have it like, you're facing the champion in the Elite Four area, whatever it's called.
This is my theory about that actually. The entire Pokemon world that you play through, that was your dream to become the champion.
Oh.
And like when you wake up, you are the champion.
Yeah.
Because like you had just like become the champion, and you go and sleep after becoming the champion, and you have to dream of all like your entire adventure all the way through and how you got to champion.
Yeah.
And then you wake up and you're still champion.
I kind of like that. Yeah, we've got different theories going. The hero's journey versus the dream hero's journey, maybe we can call it. So yeah, you really hear that not only... Well, you see that in the story and the format of the game, but you kind of hear it in the music. It starts off with that light Pallet Town music, and then with the roots as you go through them, that hero journey music starts getting more serious until you get to the end when it's got really serious music, and then finally can you come back home and you're in Pallet Town again. One little add-on to that. A really common part of the hero's journey is it's called facing the father. Which in this game we don't even have a father.
Yeah, in all of the Pokemon games, you are fatherless.
Not in Hoenn, in like
Hoenn.
Emerald, but yeah, most of them. It's a bit weird.
Your father in Hoenn is a gym leader.
Yeah, they're just bad fathers in the Pokemon world apparently.
I guess.
But what's interesting, this is my little theory, is that in the game, in Pokemon Red and Green, there is like there's data there that is not used, and you can actually glitch and make work for you to actually face Professor Oak right at the end after you beat the champion, which he basically is like your father. He's like your mentor. So it almost was in there, but for whatever reason they took it out. But yeah, if you find the right glitch, you can actually end up facing him, and he's got Pokemon, and yeah, he's meant to be the toughest one. So it's almost like that element of the hero's journey was in there. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Gosh, we've already talked for like 50 minutes and only gotten through the journey music. So much more to cover. So much great more music to cover, which is great.
So much more to cover, and we will let you know how our adventure of us, your boy, goes.
Yeah, true. We're still doing our Pokemon adventure as this goes. One thing, just before we finish, that we briefly heard in that little compilation of songs as we were talking about the hero's journey, there's a end titles song, which I reckon is another great journey sort of theme, kind of the peak of the journey. And it's used to open a lot of the anime films, quite a lot. So it's really part of the, again, that Pokemon sound. I wanted to give an idea, as we talked about before, 8-bit music might not be your thing, and that's totally fine, but there's a lot of ways to listen to these tracks in more modern, either real instruments or really good sounding kind of electronic instruments. To give an idea of what, again, some of these songs might sound like with real instruments, let's have a quick listen to the original anime's version of that end titles theme. Oh, it's just the sound of my childhood in one track. It's
Same.
so good.
So I completely agree with that.
Oh.
I grew up watching the anime as well, and I watched the movies.
I think that's a big part of the success. We talked about it before, but a big part of success. The fact that it wasn't just a game. You could then have your Pokemon in your trading cards, so you could collect them on trading cards. Then you could watch them on screen, which is like a big part of seeing the Pokemon do stuff. Because in the game, they're just little pixels that can't, especially at this early stage. Like nowadays in the games, they move around and they're really well, animated. But in these early games, they were just a couple of dots on screen. They didn't do much. Whereas you'd watch the anime and see them do all these amazing things. So anyway, we could talk about that forever. That is the end of part 1. We will see you soon for part 2.
Wish us luck on our Pokemon journey.
Yeah, and good luck on your Pokemon journey.
Indeed.
See you later.
Bye.